Hello, Laziali all over the world. I mean, being a Lazio fan is very stressful, but at the same time, you learn a lot of things. For example, after Saturday, I'm probably the biggest expert of malaria in Italy. And now I'm learning everything about this Malaysia. So, Alasdair, I mean, if you were only a Ross County fan, you would never know anything about malaria, right?
You might have to explain what this intro to the podcast is about today. It's a slightly confusing one, especially because when we were talking before we started, I had no idea what you're on about for certainly the second one. But yeah, it's one of these very Lazio things, isn't it? We've come out of an international break and we're like Googling diseases on Wikipedia. Go on, explain it.
Well, if you are not aware, on Friday night, the Senegal national team released a statement saying that Dia had caught the malaria fever, and so he was out from the national team. Then on Saturday morning, it looks like he was fine. He was getting back home, or maybe training with the team. So we had to catch up with everything about malaria that I thought was a disease disappearing in Europe pretty much. And there were a lot of question marks because they said that if after the mosquito bite, it takes like 2 weeks to have the first symptom. So it didn't make sense as Dia went to Senegal last week. So it was a little bit too early. So we all had to study various type of malaria, the consequence, how long will the Dia be out, can he...
Do you have a PhD now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could get a degree in medicine. And the funniest thing, Alasdair, is I was thinking, if he has malaria, can he take a flight back home? I mean, it didn't make a lot of sense, right? But I found out that it's contagious only through mosquitoes, so he should be fine. But that was part one. Part two is yesterday, Nuno Tavares should have been playing against Croatia with his Portugal team. He wasn't in the starting 11. He wasn't on bench. And 30 minutes before the game, the coach said, well, Nuno Tavares has malaria, I think it's called, and he has a little bit of a knee problem, so he's not playing today. And obviously you can imagine the how Lazio fan could react to this. I mean, Nuno Tavares is probably one of the best players we had so far, and now there's concern how long will he be out.
Yeah, well, two of the best players we've had so far this season that you've talked about. I mean, the thing with Dia, I guess, that we should say is that after that happens, it then seemed that he doesn't have malaria within the space of 24 hours. I mean, one of the reports I read basically said either he doesn't have malaria or he's made the fastest recovery ever known to man from malaria. But, I mean, I think Baroni said yesterday that he expects him to be back training this today and playing against Bologna possibly, so probably not malaria. I mean, again, I'm no expert, but like you said, I mean, when I've travelled to countries that are malaria countries, it's pretty, you get to know it's a pretty serious thing. You don't just bounce back in 48 hours. So anyway, hopefully Dia's fine. Hopefully Tavares is fine, because whatever the name of that injury was, I have no idea what it is, and it reminds me slightly of the Luis Alberto pubalgia when we kept hearing the sport and I was like, what the hell is this thing, and kept coming back and back again. But anyway, other than that, international break pretty much unscathed. Rovella tried to break Guendouzi's legs a couple of times, but otherwise Rovella was probably the success story of this break. Would you say Isaacson as well?
Do you think there's something going between Rovella and Guendouzi? I mean, maybe that was a sign from Rovella, hey, I'm the leader here, stop pretending to be the number one in midfield. Apart from that, we have to mention that Isaacson is scoring more goals with the national team than with Lazio, I think, right? He played 3 games so far and scored twice. And yesterday he played in midfield, so that's surprising, right? Or do you think it's something you could expect coming? And, it's a positive sign, because he wasn't called from the national team 2 years ago, and now he's starting or coming in pretty much every game. So that's positive. And they qualified for the National League quarterfinals. Don't remember, what did Scotland do, by the way?
Scotland heroically defeated Croatia and Poland in the space of 3 days, Vittorio. So avoiding relegation is what we do. I just had to check because Carsten did send us a message about Isaksen. So he said Isaksen played 30 minutes for Denmark versus Spain. He hit the post and scored a goal and was voted man of the match. And I'd be surprised if he doesn't start versus Serbia tonight. So he wrote this a few days ago. He did start against Serbia as well, but I can't remember. They drew that game, I think.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like you say, he wasn't featuring much for Denmark. It does feel like this is the season that Isaksen's got the chance to take that next step. I mean, we've spoken about this several times already in terms of Lazio, but it seems to be almost like replicated across the international level where he's getting his opportunities and now he needs to take them with the Danish national team too. So, I think that's pretty encouraging. We have got a new format for today's podcast though, don't we? Do you want to explain what we're doing while I get things prepared?
Yeah, well, basically, we receive a lot of questions, and not always we have time to answer to them, so we're doing a sort of cappuccino and Q&A to answer to some of your questions you ask us on Twitter. So please go again on our Twitter account and ask us questions. Tell us if you like this new podcast, and please support us. I mean, you can become membership to Lazio Lounge, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts at $2 a month. And if you don't, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are growing fast thanks to you. But before the question, someone asked me, Alasdair, why do Lazio fan chants sing Giardini di Marzo before and after the game? Do you know about that? What's the reason?
I just thought there was some link. Is Battisti, right? I thought there was some link between him and Lazio, but maybe I'm wrong.
Didn't you get a post-degrees in Italian music songwriters? I thought you did. That's incredible. Anyway.
Still catching up.
So Lucio Battisti it was, because he's dead, one of the great songwriters of the 70s and 80s in Italy. And he was a very shy person, to be honest. And no one knew a lot about his family, his story, his things. And when he died, the co-writer of his song said, well, he was a Lazio fan. He didn't show up that much, but he was secretly going to games when he had time and things like that. So when Lazio find out this, to celebrate the anniversary of the 5th year death of Battisti, they sang the Giardini di Marzo before a Lazio game. Fans simply adore it and start doing it pretty much every single game. And then what happened? As usual, Roma fans start, pretending that he was a Roma fan. His nephew published an article saying, no, he was a Roma fan, everybody knew that. And this is a little bit like Russell Crowe. I don't know if you know the story.
Yes, I was just about to say Russell.
Everybody thought, well, he was the actor of The Gladiator. Of course he's a Roma fan. And he said, no, I'm a Lazio fan. And Totti has the tattoo of The Gladiator, thinking he was a Roma fan. So the problem with Roma fans is they believe that every single people alive is a Roma fan, which isn't. So basically, this is the story about why we're singing Giardini Marzo before the game.
But you've not given us a rendition, so we know what it sounds like, Vittorio. He was singing it just before we started recording. It was beautiful. That's a good question and an interesting answer. So there you go, Lucio Battisti. It's a nice song. I started listening to it just on my own the other day, actually. Right, let's get to the list of questions I've got here on Twitter. Well, let's actually start with our friend Karsten Grock, who we already mentioned, and a player we've already touched on, which is Nicolo Rovella. Don't talk about Rovella, he says. If you do, please focus on his mistakes in the two internationals brackets. There were none. He was excellent. And he says, jokes aside, Lazio have found their new Sergei Milinkovic-Savic, a player every team in the world wants, and he's only 22. So how do Lazio keep him? Now, I did see that a couple of people had misunderstood what he meant about this, which is not that Rovella is the same kind of player as Milinkovic-Savic, but the point he makes about him being a player that everyone in the world is going to want, and that he's young and we've got him at the right time. So how do we keep him? I mean, do you wanna take that one on first?
How do we keep him? Well, obviously, I have to fix the camera. Well, the biggest problem is the salary, I think, right? You have to make him happy. He's quite happy at Lazio. I think he's becoming more and more a Lazio fan, if you can say that. He's playing, that's very important. Obviously, when a huge bid arrives, we're going to see what's going to happen. But it doesn't look to me that he's a player who's thinking, next move is going to be Real Madrid. It doesn't remind me of Biglia, just to make an example, that every summer is saying, hey, Real Madrid, Real Madrid. No, I think he's happy there. He knows he still have to improve, and I think he does. But, that's a great move we made. Let's not forget that we signed Rovella thanks to Juventus money issues. They had to sell players, and we were there at the right moment for the right player. I think at the moment he's the best Italian midfielder we have. So, I think the next step is renewing his contract, offering a big wage, and see how things plan out. I'm not sure a lot of Italian team has the money to afford him at the moment. So, it's going to be probably a Premier League team who can take him away from us. But he's enjoying his time in Lazio, so I think he's not planning to move away at the moment.
Yeah, and generally it's not something we always have to worry about. We've got plenty of things to worry about as Lazio fans. But, Lotito selling his best players after one good season isn't one of them. And Milinkovic-Savic, who was name-checked in this question, is the ultimate example of that, because we kept him for the best years of his career before eventually selling him, less of a price than we would have wanted at his peak, but considering he was 1 year from his contract and that he went off to Saudi where, he's not going to do us any damage, it was not bad business. So Rovella, Lotito will protect him as an asset, and I don't think he will sell him, and I think he'll probably set a ridiculously high price tag if there is interest. I think the thing that'll be really interesting to see, because we're not seeing loads, I think now that he's broken into the Italy team, there's probably a bit more talk around him recently, but Baroni did an interview yesterday where he was talking about Rovella and saying how he expects that we're going to start seeing more goals from his game soon, and talking about how he sees the attacking qualities from Rovella, who's not just a pure playmaker. I think if he starts adding goals to his game, then that generally is a bit of a, kind of dull way of looking at it, where it's just you start scoring goals, you add value, but it is the kind of thing that captures people's attention. And you've seen him taking a lot of long-distance shots recently. If those start flying in, people will start going, oh my god, this guy is Çalhanoğlu, his best rival in the league.
And I think there's another thing to point out, and it's the injuries, because unfortunately so far Rovella never played a full season, and that's something that I think it counts, right? Unfortunately last year he'd been out for nearly 2 months. He did the same 2 years ago, so he's a very valuable player, but he never proved to be able to play a full season, which could be a problem going forward and could limit his opportunity. But playing with the national team, obviously things change. He's going to have more visibility, which I don't think is perfect for us. We have to keep him in the squad. But let's be honest, he's one of the best midfielders in Serie A so far. So, yeah. Talking about Milinkovic-Savic, would you want Sergej back after his experience in Saudi Arabia?
Yes. Of course.
He's 31, though. He's going to be 31.
I love that guy. I think he's one of my favourite players to wear the shirt, and absolutely. Because, look, he's really got that connection to the club, doesn't he? He's not... That was the other thing when we're talking about keeping Rovella. It's about fostering an environment where a player is really happy. Like you said, that can be down to salary, it can just be down to environment or appreciating you're in the right place with the right coach playing the right kind of football. And I think Sergej always felt that, certainly under Inzaghi. Of course I'd take him back. What a player. I think, obviously, he's the wrong side of 30, as they say, and he would be expensive salary-wise, but I think that you can still get some great football out of that guy, if it was an option. I mean, can you really see that happening, though? Do you think that's when? Next summer, or what are you talking about?
Well, I don't know if you're updated with everything going with Sergei, but he's not feeling great there. He's not happy. He hasn't been called to the national team because his psychology is not feeling great. I don't know. I was seeing his average in Saudi Arabia, and he's scoring pretty much the same as Lazio, with the biggest difference that he had to score against Szczesny, Andanovic, and so on. There he's playing against Saudi Arabia goalkeeper. So that's not a good sign. He should be scoring much more goals than he did in the past. So, and is he keeping himself fit to the Serie A level, or playing there? It's, the physical condition is lower. You don't have to run 95 minutes. So I think that's something to take account for. He's 31. He's not getting any younger. So maybe he's not going to be able to go back to his level. But I guess we have other questions, right, Alasdair?
Yes, we should probably move on from that. I mean, actually, the next comment that came up on my feed was from someone called Vittorio Campanile, saying, please don't ask questions like, why is Alasdair still on the show, because I can't answer this type of question. I'm going to ignore that one.
I can answer.
I'm going to ignore that one. I'm not handing over the microphone here. Right, well, there's two questions I think we can kind of pool into one, which is one from Can Bayazit, who said, I'm curious how the Post-Ciro era is unfolding. Lazio seem to be having a solid season, but is he being missed? And then we got one from Juzo saying, how do you rate Tati so far this season, and should we expect more from him goals-wise? So, how much do we miss Ciro, and how do you think Tati's going on?
Are we missing Ciro? We always miss Ciro, right? I mean, he was a leader, he was a captain, top goal scorer, but I think we mentioned it already in this podcast. It was time to move on. Probably we were 1 or 2 years late. We could have made much more money selling Ciro 2 years ago, and we could have used that money to improve our squad. So definitely the experience, the leadership is missing, but it was time to move on. I said Castellano was probably one of the biggest surprise so far of the season, because he already scored more goals than he did last year. So that's definitely a bonus. That definitely is a good surprise. The thing is, he's shooting a lot on target, but he's one of the striker who had more huge big opportunity in the stats. So, and you could see it against Monza, right? I think Monza was our last game. He had 2 huge opportunities when he came in. You have to take those opportunities, right? He has to score those goals, because that would have made our game easier, the end of the game easier. So happy, but I can see a lot of improvement still he can make. He's a fighter. He's very useful. He helped the team, but he's a number 9. He needs to score those big opportunities. I mean, not all of them, but at least half of them, right?
Yeah. Look, I think we have to call it a huge success, because I would say huge, just because he is such a different player from what he was last year. And if you rewind 3 months to the discussions we were having and the doubts we had, they were enormous doubts of whether he could fill Ciro's boots. I mean, when I say fill Ciro's boots, I don't think anyone expected Tati or anyone else to come in and be the, European Golden Boot winner and Capocannoniere and so on. But it's more just having the reliable source of goals from a number 9, hitting double figures every season, that kind of thing. And I think he is well on course to getting those double figures. He's in the Argentina national team. I think he's found a system that works for him, because I think having Dia playing close to him has helped. Because even when he was really poor last season, I did mention regularly that he did link up quite well with the team. He was quite good at holding up the ball and linking attack and midfield. And I think he's found a way of a system where he's getting more chances. We're not over relying on having those 2 or 3 really good chances in a game to win a game. Where with Baroni's football, we're constantly attacking and creating more. So I think he will still miss those chances. I still have my doubts about whether he'll ever be a great finisher. But I don't think it matters anymore as much under Baroni, because he'll always get more And, speaking about Ciro, that was one of the great strengths of Ciro's game, was that on his own he was able to find chances always. It was incredible, his ability to, with his movement, his intelligence, to kind of create opportunities for himself. And he didn't score, he didn't finish every single chance he got. He was a better finisher than Tati, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like he hit 9 out of 10 shots in the goal. He just always found another chance, and that was why he was so prolific. I do miss Ciro, though, in terms of having that kind of emotional connection to one of the players on the pitch. I don't think we have that anymore with anyone in this squad to the same extent. Sergei also, we've just spoken about. I think it'll take a while to rebuild that kind of connection. But
can I ask you something about Ciro, Luis Alberto, and probably even Sergei? Because do you think that there's a different attitude in the squad right now without them? More positive attitude? We are fighting for the Europa League. I mean, this week we had Pedro saying, my dream is to win the Europa League. We had Pellegrini saying, we are focused, we are looking to win the Europa League, or at least trying. I mean, in the past, have you ever heard Ciro saying, our goal is to win the Europa League? Or Luis Alberto saying, hey, we need to win the Europa League? It looks to me that for those type of players, it was like a waste of time. It's pretty much the same thing I'm feeling when I have to record a podcast with you. It's time wasted. But with the Noslin, etc., it's completely different, right?
Don't know how to respond to that. Yeah, I mean, certainly Claudio Lotito thinks that, doesn't he? He's spoken repeatedly, and again yesterday, I think, about this squad not having prima donnas. And when he says that, he's not just talking about that as being a compliment to this team, is he? He's talking about that as being in comparison to what came before, and clearly in terms of those individuals, and maybe towards Sarri as well a little bit. I'm not really sure. He doesn't name-check people so much. Luis Alberto is definitely one, because he wasn't a leader. He was a leader by example, by ability, but not by behaviour. And it's quite nice not having all his regular, off-pitch sideshows, whatever they were. So yeah, I do think that has helped the team, certainly, that there aren't, and we've talked about this in terms of tactically as well, it helps not having fixed places in this team where there are certain players who can't be moved from the pitch. I think it's created a good emotional balance, yeah. And leadership is spread throughout the team, and I think there's opportunity in this team still for people to become leaders, or to show that their quality in that sense. Adam Maricic is often wearing the captain's armband, but he's not necessarily someone you think of as a really vocal leader, per se. Zaccagni is the captain this season, but he's not necessarily an obvious captain to me. What I mean is not that those are bad choices, but that it shows that there's a kind of spread across the squad of people who can show that kind of leadership, which I think is something Baroni's done really well, to be honest.
Can I add something? Because I want to hear your opinion on that. Zaccagni have been subbed pretty much every single game. And even when he was playing well, Baroni still subbed him. And every time he got out, he shake his hand with the manager, give a high five to the player coming in, etc. Imagine Luis Alberto doing that. I mean, last game he was playing great, and he was subbed for Isaacsen, I think. I mean, imagine Luis Alberto taking that well. I mean, it would never happen, and that's another bad attitude that he was sending to the other players. I'm Luis Alberto, I'm the best of everybody else, I need to play, etc. I think Zaccagni is a very important player. He's showing now in the last games, but his leadership is positive. Now, I'm not sure he was the right choice to be the captain, because I don't think he's a leader. I think he's a leader by example. He's showing he's the top player, but that's another positive sign for us, right? I guess you have other questions.
Yeah, we can move on to the next one. Per Nielsen, long-time listener. How have the ultras in Rome responded to the current success? The protest in the summer was massive, but the turnout both home and away is pretty much the same as always. And what does the general fan in Rome think about Lotito? Thank you for keeping the podcast going, Forza Lazio. It's quite an interesting question, this, because it wasn't that long ago, Vittorio, you were across the river over there at the Stadio Flaminio when there was that enormous protest at the start of the season, the first couple of home games, anti-Lotito chanting kind of throughout. And the atmosphere was pretty sour not very long ago. And it goes to show, I would say, that performances can kind of be a bit of a cure for anything. I don't think the attitude towards Lotito has particularly changed, let's say. But, you know, given that I'm most of the time watching from 2 kilometres away in the Tribuna Stampa, and you're in there with all the fans, I mean, you give your perspective on this.
It's the Stadio Olimpico, it's not the pitch of Oli and Benji. I mean, it's not 2 kilometers, but I have to say that my kids pretty much enjoy that protest. They had a lot of fun chanting against Lotito. But, I mean, the fans still, and I think you can hear it from the stands, right? From the TV as well. They don't love Lotito still. They still protest. But the most important thing, guys, is that when they did this protest against Lotito, they said, we are gonna complain about the coach, etc., of the owner, but we wanna go to the stadium. So every single fan who was against Lotito, if he could, obviously, if he had the money, did a season ticket. Because the plan was, we're going to show to the stadium, we're going to fill the stadium, and we're going to chant against Lotito for the full game. And so that's why the stadium is packed, home and away. Lazio fans are incredible from that point of view. And we have to say that the biggest difference was, first game of the season, I think it was Lazio Venezia. For the first half, so the first 45 minutes, we only sang songs against Lotito. And that was the first game, the second, the third. If you go back and check what was the last home game, I don't remember. Lazio Empoli probably? No, there was another one. We only sang like 5 minutes against Lotito. And it's because obviously the team is playing so much better that the fans are, you know, more supportive, more willing to chant for the club instead of against Lotito. But that doesn't change the point of view. If tomorrow offer comes to buy the club, they're all going to hope that they do it, right? So I think, you know, as you were mentioning, the performance are helping, and more fans are going to the stadium, but the position against Lotito is still there, right?
Yeah, and I don't think there's a huge... I think the ultras, in terms of this idea of the ultras and the general fan, I think the ultras are always going to be the ones who have the hardest, strongest opinions anti-Lotito, but I would say that it's a pretty widespread viewpoint. I mean, perhaps you'll find more balanced views about some appreciating what he's done to stabilise the club financially and how Lazio are in a better position in that regard compared to a lot of other teams in Serie A and so on. And, you know, getting this team into the position it's in of competing in Europe most years and all that. But he's not popular, to say the least. And I don't think his personality helps particularly because he's very confrontational and, you know, he's not very diplomatic in his response when people do raise legitimate questions to him about the running of the club.
And then there's another thing very important, and we're going to have a test now, because this team needs a midfielder, right? In January, we need to sign someone there. And unfortunately, the history of Lotito as Lazio owner tells us that in January, if we are not fighting for relegation, he doesn't sign nobody. I think this team, Baroni, what they're doing, they deserve to have help from the club. So, you know, if in January we don't sign anybody, I can understand fans being frustrated or upset about this, because you don't need to sign Messi to get to the Champions League, right? You need to sign a midfielder who can give a little bit of rest to Guendouzi and Rovella. So this is one of the concern, you know. I'm not against Lotito because I hate him or for personal reason. I'm against Lotito because he's always close to make the step to move forward, but he never does it. This winter, he has a huge opportunity, because I think if we buy a midfielder, Lazio would be really seriously a contender for the first 4 spots. So Champions League again. And that Champions League money is very important for us. But if he doesn't do it, then, you know, he's not willing to make the step to help this team increase. He will be satisfied to be always in this position, which fans don't want. I mean, every fan wants to improve the team every year, so that's another problem.
Yeah, I hope you've answered that one. I mean, I've just realised we probably have to start moving through these questions a bit faster if we're not going to be here for 3 hours. But here's one from Vuteling about the season in general. Well, there's 2 questions, okay. Well, I think we can probably deal with the second one quite quickly. It says, what would you prefer? A, finish in the top 4. B, win the Coppa Italia by humiliating Gasparini in the final. Or C, seeing Pedro score the winner in the Europa League final. I mean, the issue here is that, it's got to be C, right? Because not only would we see Lazio winning European trophy, but the reward would be the same as option A, finishing in the top 4, which is a Champions League spot. So unless you really hate Gasparini, it's C, isn't it?
Has to be C. And, I would be even happy if Isai scored the winning goal. I don't care. Winning the Europa League would be a massive trophy for us. Yeah. An incredible achievement. And it's something, in this podcast, how often did we talk about this? This is the first time, probably, that we're seeing Lazio really challenging to win this trophy. We're not saying we're favorite. We're not saying that it's going to be easy. Manchester United now is going to be a tough competitor, right? But at least we are thinking about finish top, and then, everything can happen. So, yes, definitely C. The only thing would make me think about it is if you add D, Roma get relegated. But if you don't put that option, then it's C all the time, right?
Yeah. Moving on to, I'm going to again pool a few similar questions together here, because the first part of this Vuteling question was, what do you consider the weakest position in the team, and which Italian player would you like to see there as a replacement? But we've also had one from Rami Elgendi, another long-time listener. Do we need any new signings in the winter, and if so, which position? And then another one from Rocky saying, with so much success in the last transfer window with smaller wage signings, do you think Lazio should try to find their missing pieces at that price point, or spend more money than they usually do on a player? So this is all about really reinforcing in January what do we need and how do we go about getting it. And the question about an Italian replacement is quite an interesting one as well. Where do you want to start with that?
How many questions? Too many questions. So,
general January.
Let's start from one thing. We need a couple of players in January. I said a midfielder. We probably need a defender, central defender. Patrick is often injured. So, but looking to our history, if we sign a player, I would be happy. We need a midfield. That's our top priority. Italian one, I'm not sure there is someone available. I would say Ricci, but Torino will never give it to you, right? So, how it's called? Bouyaye, the Verona guy? It's Belayan.
Yeah, he's good.
Belayan, but Boulaye is the name. Sorry, guys. Belayan is a very interesting player. We know that Lazio has good relationship with the Verona owner. So, that would be a terrific signing. He's under 22, so he doesn't enter in our list. So that's another positive sign. Italian, Foloruscio then.
Yeah.
That would be a good signing.
Even after not playing for 6 months.
Yeah. Obviously you have to go to the cheap option. You cannot say, I'm signing Tonali. But yeah, that's a weakness point, right? That's where we are struggling. I would say keep an eye on the central defender, because again, Patrick is often injured. He missed half of our games so far this season. So that's a question mark. But Gigot looks interesting. I'm not convinced 100%, but that's what we have, so it would be good enough. Cherki, I don't think he's coming in January, maybe in June. But yeah, I think that's what we need to sign in January. Again, we know Lotito never did it, and we're gonna spend 10 million euros for those type of players. So I'm not positive on this, I would say.
Yeah, in terms of the question of whether it's worth pursuing the idea of signing lower wage players, it probably is, yes, because that's kind of what Lazio have to do, because we're not going to be I mean, it's always amazing if we sign anyone in January, let alone if we spend money, proper money in January. So that's realistically what we're going to do. And that's the tough thing when you're trying to find ideas of Italian players. How do you avoid spending money and getting a decent Italian player in January? It's difficult. Yep. For Laurencio, to be honest, I'm not convinced by. Just because, so I think he's a good player, but in this system, I don't think he plays that kind of role. I think he's more that Deli Bashiru problem of like, he doesn't really fit in anywhere in this team, obviously. So I have my doubts there, but anyway, let's move on. And we've actually got one about across the city, Vittorio. So I can take a stab at this one first and pass over to you. But we got a question from Tati Castellanos, the man himself.
We know him. For our podcast.
He said, Roma's mess. Can they be unfortunately revived under Ranieri, especially for the derby? Now, it is an interesting one. Been following the Roma story quite closely this year. It's been a lot of fun. Ranieri is, for me, kind of the man they had to get rather than the right man to get. And what I mean by that is that everything's turned so far against the Friedkins after the decisions they've made, sacking Daniele De Rossi, choosing Juric as successor, etc., that they were kind of out of people who could get the fans back on side. Ranieri was kind of the only guy left who was going to, unless Totti, yeah, but he's not a coach. But, you know, even if they got a really high-profile Mancini or Allegri, someone like that, I still think it wouldn't have calmed down these protests, you know. So the fact that Ranieri's come in, they've already been drawing murals of him in Testaccio, and they've already, you know, there's banners all around the city welcoming him home, and he's a bit of a hero here but that's because he's Romanista. It's not because he's particularly achieved. His first season was pretty good, but other than that, he's not achieved much in his previous spells. And he's got such a big job, you know, for someone who's just coming out of retirement, and who in recent years has been more of a relegation fighter. I mean, maybe that's what he's doing this season, Vittorio, who knows? But, you know, it's a hell of a job because that team is such a mess. There's such a lack of balance there at the moment. In terms of looking ahead to the derby, I'd say, can he get things back on track by then? Possibly, because they've got a lot of time, because the derby for some reason isn't until January this year. But he's got such a difficult start. Napoli away, Tottenham away, and Atalanta at home. And the team, there's so many problems in that team at the moment that I don't really see an immediate transformation, put it that way. I think he can probably organise them better and start getting better form out of certain players because they're playing way below their ability. But do I see a complete transformation of that team under Ranieri? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Well, talking about the derby, it's such a particular game. It's different from all the others that anything can happen. So, yeah, Roma could play maybe a great derby and play rubbish all the season long. So that's something we have to say. I mean, nobody wants to lose the derby, even if your manager is someone you hate. You will give your best in your derby. So that's my biggest concern. Talking about Roma, I think Friedkin is one of the best Laziali ever. I mean, he's doing an amazing job there. I mean, if I was the Roma owner, I would do exactly what he did, you know. So, terrific job from Friedkin. You know, they're playing Napoli away this Sunday. If they lose that game, they're going to be like 16 points from us and from the Champions League. So it's going to be really, really tough to get back. But I'm going to tell you this one. Yesterday on my Facebook page, a Roma fan wrote me and say, hey, with Ranieri, we are winning the Scudetto. So, you know, they are unbelievable. They are unbelievable. I mean, they have so many problems, and they sign Ranieri, who's not Pep Guardiola, and they think they're going to win the title. So this is a Roma fan, in a nutshell, right? So they believe that everything is going to be fine. They're going to beat Napoli, Atalanta, Tottenham, and they're going to win the league. So I think this is the problem they have. They are so convinced that everything's going to be fixed. And it's not easy, because they have a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, it is such an emotional club that really has its highs and lows based on emotion. And I think that there's a chance they have a spike in form because that emotion is finally positive again right now. But yeah, I mean, let's wait and see with that one. I think even if they can, I mean, in terms of the derby, like you say, they are always one-off games. They're kind of unique, and often actually it seems like the team that's less favoured is the team that does better. But so we'll see how things are in January. But we've got a good lead over them, even if they do turn things around. But on the back of that final question, Vittorio, again from Rami, our friends, Baroni has done a fantastic job so far in 3 months of football, but so have Napoli, Fiorentina and Atalanta. So has he really been as exceptional as we all say? And with rumours of him getting a better contract, is it really the time for it? I mean, I guess he's got every right to ask the question, I suppose, because there's this breakaway top six. We're not the only unexpected team up there. I mean, my answer would be yes, he has been exceptional, but you go first.
Well, the thing is, we didn't have a terrific summer transfer, right? We signed players from Verona, Salernitana, unknown players like Dele Bashiru. So, I mean, this summer, Gazzetta dello Sport was saying Atalanta can fight for the title this season. Napoli will fight for the title this season. Fiorentina signed a lot of players that we were dreaming to have, right? Colpani, Ken, De Gea. So, they all had targets higher than Lazio. I mean, everybody was projecting Atalanta in the top 4, right? Napoli in the top 2, right? Everybody was expecting Lazio to be 7th or 8th, so we are overperforming. Now, the question is, will be able to finish in the top 4 this year? That's difficult. That's hard, because I think we have other teams that are built better than us. Atalanta, Napoli, and so on. But anything can happen. I mean, I didn't expect to see Juventus so bad below us, and now they have Vlahovic injured. I didn't expect Milan to be, 5 points below us? So, I mean, if the other team underperform, we can be there. But Baroni has done a terrific job. Terrific. I was expecting the first 2 months to be terrible, with all the players having to adapt to the new type of football, to the new town, etc. Instead, it looked like they were already here, for years. The thing is, and I want your answer on this, I think this summer transfer wasn't great. It was the past one. Look, Guendouzi, leader. Rovella, great player. All the players we signed last year are overperforming or doing great. Castellano, top scorer. I mean, even Isaacsen, who is not playing great, has had a huge impact. Mandas, So it's not this summer, it's the past summer that is performing now, right?
Yeah, look, I think I would kind of look at different categories as to why I think he's been exceptional. I think one of them has to be something we've already discussed today, which is the environment he walked into. Talking about those protests, talking about the atmosphere in those opening games of the season. Everyone was kind of ready for Lazio to fail, because there was a feeling that the club and Lotito had accepted failure with these unambitious signings and what was seen as an unambitious appointment in Baroni. And it must be difficult to foster that culture and environment of positivity, which he seems to have done immediately. I mean, all the interviews with players recently have spoken about basically Baroni's really got everyone on board, and it's a really great place to work, and everyone really enjoys playing his football and all this. So for him to do that, create that environment with a new group of players, lots of new faces, in the backdrop of pretty difficult, stuff happening off the pitch, that is really impressive. Secondly, I would say, as in terms of a coaching job, tactically, he's been so impressive, because he basically had to rebuild this team tactically. Sarri's system was very rigid, 4-3-3. We know exactly what you're going to get every week, very inflexible. And then we suddenly leapt into Igor Tudor's football of a 3-man defence and trying to play in a completely different way. And then he leaves this squad, and they've just played 2 completely different styles of football in the space of 6 months. And Baroni has to rebuild them into his idea.
Without Ciro, without Musalberto.
Without their key players, into a kind of 4-2-4 to begin with. And he's slowly as well, this has impressed me, the way he's He's adapted it as time has gone on. 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3. The way he's rotated the team has been so impressive. So I think tactically it's been a really impressive job, the way he's changed the style and the tactics of this team and the way that he's managed the squad to get them competing in Europe and in Serie A. And of course we're not going to keep this going throughout the season. I think top 6 would be a big success for me. But to be able to say he's already done what he's done is amazing. So I think a new contract is deserved.
Maybe it's too early for a new contract because he just signed one. But one thing we have to point out is that the fans, since the beginning, said we are not against the manager, we are against the owner, and we will support our manager ever. And that's what they did. So obviously it wasn't a difficult atmosphere, but not against the manager. I thought he felt that. So yeah, I think he had a terrific season, and he's going amazing. It's funny to point out how the players are talking so high about Baroni, and I'm doing exactly the opposite with you, but that's another question mark we have to answer another time. Have we finished our questions?
We have.
I finished my cappuccino, so I think it's time we leave. Thanks again, everybody, for your question. Please tell us if you like this type of show. We can try to replicate when Alasdair is available, so pretty much never. But, you know, rate and review the podcast, subscribe, and tell your friends to join us to listen to our Lazio Lounge podcast.
Thank you very much.
Take care.